Huntavore podcast, where we discuss catching, cutting, and cooking from the wild. No egos, no status, just the pursuit of organic protein and a love for wild, natural creation. Well, here we go. Episode 1.
Episode 1
of the Huntavore podcast. Dustin, how you doing tonight?
I am doing great.
That's
in
good.
In the basement of my Barry County home.
Yes. Here in Michigan, we have a big hunting tradition. Am I right?
I would say you are right. If you're going to look at hunting traditions throughout the country, Michigan's going to be at the top of the list. We may not be number one. We may be flirting with perhaps Pennsylvania or Wisconsin, but yes, we have the tradition here in Michigan.
But we certainly have one of the most populous hunting populations, do we?
That we do. We're in the top of the charts with hunting culture and hunters in the woods.
Well, perfect. So I guess it would only be fitting that Michigan would gain themselves another hunting podcast. Although I think we want to take a slightly different turn. Here on this podcast, we're going to be focusing on, the catching or the taking of game, but then we're also going to look at the cutting and the cooking of game. So Dustin, tell me a little bit about you. What's your day job? What is your mild-mannered profession?
My mild-mannered profession. My profession is a marketer. I am a marketing researcher. Super exciting. I work for the state of Michigan, so I have the office life.
Excellent.
It's extreme.
Cubicle? Is your chair padded with wheels?
My chair is indeed wheeled and padded. It's a sweet ride. It can go up and down. It's got the adjustable arms. It's a nice piece. It's a nice piece, and it was made in Michigan, so keep it local.
All right, steel case?
I think it might be Herman Miller.
Herman Miller. Hey, also a good brand.
Yes. So what about you, Nick?
Well, I do have a chair. It does have wheels. It's not a very nice chair, and I don't really sit in it. I'm a physical education teacher for an elementary school. We play a lot of games. We learn a lot about sports. But we also do a lot of therapy on winning and losing. That is a tough subject for young kids.
I can only imagine.
But hey, scooter day is great. Parachute day is the best. I look forward to that.
I think I might actually bring scooter day as a suggestion into my office. Because, one, I feel like that would go over well. And two, why not?
Excellent. Well, I can hook you up with some scooters. So, Dustin, we're starting this Huntavore podcast. Why did we come up with the name Huntavore?
That's a really good question. The Huntavore. What is that? What do we mean by the Huntavore? Well, hunt is in there, obviously. So we're pursuing game. We're going after and acquiring game and fish. We don't want to leave fish out.
Come on, little fishies.
In
don't
Avore,
go anywhere.
Oh, we're hungry, so we got to eat it. And there we go. And from A to Z, there's a whole process in there. It's a beautiful process. So
gotcha. Kind of a spin take on locavore. The people that are looking for their produce next door, a lot of gardening. We're just taking that same idea, but adding it to hunting.
It is. It is exactly the same idea.
Now, Dustin, tell me about you in the state of Michigan and how you got your start in hunting.
Yeah, so as we discussed hunting, having the built-in culture, I was definitely ingrained in that from a young age. So dad hunts, brother hunts. That's just what you do. You go hunt. So as a young kid, I went up to up north. That's a big thing. You don't go anywhere but up north. I don't know why that direction. I guess that's where a lot of travel goes, but that's where a lot of the big woods are. So coming up from my young 8, 9, 10 years old, I'd be sitting in the blind with my dad, waiting for a deer, falling asleep in the blind, never seeing a deer. But it was fun. You know, there was a whole culture built around it. So there's camaraderie, there's just getting out, there's just experiencing something bigger than yourself. So I started out doing that, and then got more into it and started going out on my own on a little moped with a bow and arrow on my shoulder, and I did that in a more local area all on my own. Never saw a deer doing that either, but I tried very hard.
It could have been the moped.
Because I knew it was a big thing.
Was it a two-cycle?
It was a 2-cycle. It was a Honda Spree. She got after it. Good times. Then in '99, that's where my world changed. My dad bought 80 acres up north in the Osceola County area. There were deer there. There were a lot of deer there. Despite a lot of my deficiencies, I could find deer. It wasn't a problem. So, in fact, even in my first archery season there, I was 14 years old, and oh boy, here's the first deer story. So, sitting there in the woods, and everybody else is back in the cabin because it was raining, but not me, because I had this thing built into me where I wasn't seeing deer for years anyway, so I'm going to get out there. Now's the time. So I got out there, and lo and behold, the rain lights up a little bit, and here comes a doe, and I wasn't after her for whatever reason I had in my head, that whatever the right deer was. It was built in there somewhere, even though I couldn't explain it, and then a 3-point, so one on one side, 2 points on the other, comes walking through, and it's like, it's not the one, and then 2 seconds later, here comes the right deer. It's got 3 points on one side and a little forky on the other, and oh boy, did it look good to me coming through the woods. So I get up, and I'm just shaking and lining up the shot, and I had been practicing for so many years and just sitting there and so many years not having anything, and everything rushing through your head at 1 second, and that deer comes through the window and release that arrow and think that was good. Go back, get the family, and wait a little bit for it, and we're thinking all the signs are good. We've got the arrow, and it has the correct stuff on there. It's got red, it's with blood, there's a little trail, and so we're thinking, perfect. This is the scenario. So we wait. We don't know exactly where. We wait for what we think is the right amount of time, and we walk out there, and we start seeing the blood trail, and we're following the blood trail. We don't have to go too far. We go about 50 yards past where we picked up the blood trail, and there he was, just laying there, and so much overwhelming experience for 14-year-old me. And it's something I've been getting after that, aspiring to do this since I'm 8-9 years old, and all the years driving a spree and not seeing a deer. And the culmination, it was just this pride and something being up and above and beyond myself. It was this experience that I was most likely hooked before, since all the time that I spent in not seeing stuff, but that was, from that moment on, there was nothing else. It was, this is for me. So I was hooked at that point, and that was the first deer, and pretty much every weekend fall after that was Reed City deer hunting, and that's all I wanted it to be. So how about you, Nick?
My story's a little different. I didn't have a traditional startup with hunting. Dad's a farmer, and it was kind of year-round business, being there, working poultry farm here in Michigan. Not only did we raise the birds, but we also butchered the birds. Thanksgiving is a busy time for all of that. I also chose to start my life out with sports. So jumping into the hunting world, I knew about it. I knew it was there. I just didn't have time to partake into it. I was either in the wrestling room on the mat, or I was at home helping out family at the processing plant. I learned skills there that were great, but then it wasn't until adulthood. It wasn't until I got done with college that I finally said, you know what? I've been around hunting. I'm interested in hunting. I want to try it out. So 2010, my buddies that were still hunting in the local area, they were sharing a piece of property that somebody's grandpa was owning, and guys, can I join you? Sure. we'll set you up in a real good spot. That real good spot was 15 yards off the dirt road coming in. There's a house within sight. Nowhere near where they were at.
Not like a real good spot.
Yeah, they were definitely helping. However, despite having a crappy spot, I did have my first deer walk past that stand. I ended up having 4-point deer come walk within 5 yards of my stand. Really, really exciting. First time that I'd experienced an animal that close, trying to be as stealthy as I could, raising up my bow. Stuck that animal within that 5 yards. I watched him run 20 yards and just drop. My shot was right there in the vitals. He didn't even see what was going on, piled over. I was then left to watch this whole thing, and that was an incredible experience. I have taken out a lot of poultry, but I had never downed a wild animal like that. Plus the elation of all the buddies that would come in and see it. They were proud of me. They were excited for me. And then they were expecting me to then gut this deer. And that's a whole experience on itself. Is they got to point and tell me, no, cut here. Don't do that. Don't cut this. And so that was a lot of fun to be a part of that.
Then what? So you had them gutted.
I had them gutted. I then looked for them to, okay, now how do we butcher this? And the idea came up of, well, take it to a processor. Take it to somebody and cut it up for you.
Well, of course.
Of course. That felt a little like, I did all the work. This is mine. This is what I want to do. I thought I had the butchery skills from the poultry. This can't be any different. It, however, is a lot different.
A little bit bigger.
A little bit bigger, and there's 4 legs. So now, okay, fellas, show me what we're doing. I was then introduced to the term giblet.
What's a giblet?
A giblet is a piece of meat cut by someone who doesn't know what they're doing. Mostly cross grain, probably part of a larger muscle group, probably should have been connected to another piece of meat. It's really just like a mistake that you're turning into a meal.
I feel like I've acquired a lot of giblets in my day. Although I would have never called them a mistake during the time.
That's true.
That was my little gold that I was pulling out of there. A little 1x1 cube of goodness.
Yeah. Well, I think one of my aspirations now, having gone through that first deer experience, having gone through, okay, show me how to cut this, my would-be mentors not knowing what to do, I was really inspired to be like, all right, now that I know what I'm doing, now that I've put the work into figuring that part out, I want to be able to share that. So I was inspired that I had to do my research to find out how to do this. If we can use this platform to help out new hunters, or even hunters that right now, I've been cutting my deer up this way for years, and I want to find a new way to do it, to us to be at resource to help out.
Yeah, it's interesting that when you become part of a culture, and it's just something that always is, that there's almost like this second language that's very difficult to navigate. I try to put myself through that lens for a project one time, and I was like, man, you need an entire glossary that's about 53 pages thick to go through all of the different terms, and giblet wasn't even on that list. I mean, just from choke diameters to shot size to trigger pull to all of these different things. I mean, you can just go on and on and on and on and on. And to somebody that's in the culture, they're like, oh yeah, I don't know what you're talking about. And to somebody that's outside of the culture, they're like, no, I don't. No. And so it'd be great to fill in some of that content gap for those folks out there that just don't have that glossary pinging around in their brain. So it's something that I'm excited to be able to think back through that lens and help fill in some of those gaps and use some of my knowledge from back in the traditional, but just frame it in a way that it doesn't become Greek, that whoever you are, you can understand, or hopefully understand, at least making my best effort to communicate that.
There you go. Other thing too, I think from this platform, this podcast, is that for us to come across and say that in these traditional circles, you're asked by somebody outside of those circles. You're asked from someone completely new to hunting, why do you hunt? Why is this an acceptable thing for us to do now in 2018? And for us to be mindful about the reasons why we're doing this. More and more, the reason of, well, this is what we've always done, isn't becoming that acceptable anymore. People aren't viewing hunting from the outside circles, from a point of view of the outside looking in. They're not seeing the experience. They're not seeing the work that's going in. They're not seeing the plate of food that you put down on the table. They see the 2.5 second window of us shooting something, or us, putting the rod and pulling out the biggest fish that we can. They're missing the wider lens of why we're here, of what we're doing. Is that it is a camaraderie thing. It is a food thing. We're acquiring food outside of a system that is made to acquire the food for us. It's outside of a grocery shop. It's outside of a butcher shop. It's organic on its own. It's self-sustaining. It's nutritious. This is all stuff that we as hunters get and know, but we struggle to tell the rest of the world what we're doing.
I think one thing that's interesting too is the rest of the world is already incredibly accepting about hunting to acquire food. Like if you ask the question of the non-hunting public, which is a big group of people, if you look at the United States, the hunting group is probably only around 3.5–4%. So the vast majority, even though sometimes it seems like everybody hunts, it's because everybody in your social circle hunts. That's not everybody. But when you ask everybody, there's this wide acceptance of acquiring that lean protein. People understand it. It makes sense. And so it's a really good way to be able to communicate that message with those that don't maybe get all of the other intricacies, but those other intricacies are also something great to, one, figure out for yourself, because it's going to help you grow as a person, as a hunter, and actually get more out of what you're doing and maybe look at things a new way. But it's going to be able to help not only yourself, but everybody in the long run with making sure that acceptance stays high. Because that's what we ultimately want. This is a thing that is, it's not a given right, and that's okay, because there's lots of great things. We dig down inside. It's all good. So we just need to figure out how to dig down inside and have these conversations and learn how to communicate it. Hunters are by nature a lot of times very introverted and maybe defensive. So we want to be able to get past some of that just by having some open dialogue ourselves, and have everybody along for the journey and be able to draw some of those parallels, or maybe think about a different angle. So it's going to be good. It's going to be fun.
Well, I'm glad through your marketing that you've got some of those numbers in for us, telling that there is hope.
There is hope.
We're not down and out, but
yeah. I'm not even trying to sell you. Like, those are real numbers. I'm not faking it.
Well, that's great, and I'm glad that they're accepting of people acquiring food through hunting. When I come to the table with that, both figuratively and realistically, if I'm talking to somebody who's not a hunter or who don't know anything about it, my first way to engage them is going to be sit at a kitchen table by presenting my cut, by bringing something from the grill, bringing something from the oven that, hey, what you're eating right now is something that I hunted. And I try to utilize as much of that creature as possible. I see that as the easy way for me to have a conversation. Fork in hand, beer in the other. I think it's a little bit disarming for the other person. It disarms me too a little bit that I know that I'm doing is something good, and at the same time now I'm giving something good to somebody who doesn't necessarily partake in what we're doing.
I believe there's a feller out there that may call this venison diplomacy, and I wholeheartedly support that term and the idea around it. I think that's it. I mean, that's in a nutshell. What greater thing can you do than be able to share the bounty that you've been able to take with others, and inside and outside of the community? It's a great thing, but outside of the community, it does so much that you may not think about.
Yeah. I know we've spent a lot of time, Dustin, talking venison, talking deer, getting kind of heady in this stuff. Here at Huntavore, are we just going to sit and talk about deer, or what else? What else are we talking about?
I hope not. This might get... Man, I might stop listening. No, we're gonna talk about more than that. We're gonna talk about all the stuff. I mean, small game. That's not a deer. Deer would be larger than small game. So we'll talk about small game, like squirrels and rabbits and all those types of things that we have the opportunity to hunt for. Might get into a little waterfowl discussion here or there. I'm semi-retired in that, but love to be able to talk about doing some of that. And I got this hobby. It's more like an addiction called fishing. And the only thing that usually, you got to be a responsible human being. You can't. So there are things that get in the way of hunting, and I think that's part of what we want to talk about too. But one of the main things that gets in the way is my fishing hobby. So it's a balance there. That spring turkey season, that's another thing we'll talk about. I usually struggle to put the proper effort into turkey hunting, which we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the struggles because I find myself a little better at acquiring meat from the water. That's my happy place right there. It's a little easier for me. So we're gonna talk some fishing, and we'll talk all kinds of trout fishing. We'll talk about bluegills, which are these little panfish. They're delicious. Mm-hmm. We'll talk about anything that swims in the waters of Michigan. We'll talk about that, and if we get some experiences outside of that, I'm not afraid about talking about a fish that swims somewhere else either. So we'll talk about it all.
Awesome. I dabble in the fishing, but that's not my big niche. My big niche is going to be at the butcher block.
That in my big niche is so far away from the butcher block. Prior to getting some forced education from Nick sitting across here from me, I thought acceptable cutlery choices were reciprocating saws. The DeWalt was one of my favorites. It does quick work. It also produces burgers simultaneously. Yeah, so you get that too. My favorite device was the grinder, because everything that came out of a deer was a giblet. So it works great in the grinder. You just put it all through there and you get a whole bunch of burger.
It is. Dustin, you do great work with the grinder.
Yes.
We need to hone in. We need to rein you back just a bit.
This is a continued struggle weakness for me.
I've learned to not put my wallet on the table when the grinder is on, because it may go in.
It's not that chewy. It really isn't.
Well, good. Yeah, I'm glad we're going to get into the cutting up, because that seems to be my passion too, is that, we take this animal out of its environment. It's blessed us with its body, with its life, and now how much of that can we use? Can we use bits that we normally throw back? Can we cut the tongue out and try some of that? Which there's a few in my freezer right now.
All right.
That we're gonna give a try.
All right.
But yeah, whatever we can take from that leftover that we leave in the woods, that's a great useful thing that we can nourish. And even if it's just a fun thing to do, we're still using it. Like you said, the diplomacy.
Here's a pro tip right here. if you're going to be doing venison diplomacy with somebody that's not a hunter, don't start with a tongue. Just, I'm trying to think like somebody outside of me. Oh, also, if you're going to do venison diplomacy with me, don't start with a tongue. Backstrap, that loin that goes right along, that's a good one.
That's where we're going to start with
Yeah.
you. All right. Sorry. Well, then I'll rein it back a little bit as well.
Oh, I want to talk about it. I just don't want to start there. I'm all in.
You're all in.
I'm just not starting there.
Speaking of the eating, Dustin, tell me the first time you ate wild game.
The first time I ate wild game. Oh, I can't really remember. I think that's one interesting thing about my hunting culture too, is so we had this very invested, built-in, this is what you do deer hunting thing, but nobody was really that crazy about making the venison. So my mom would like to make everything but the venison. So I know we had it, but it wasn't like this big celebrated moment, which I feel like I missed out on something a little bit. Like, it's something that I enjoy, especially since I know where it came from and I was part of the process. It's like more than so many things. So I couldn't even tell you exactly when that first bite was. I know it was something that we had, but it wasn't celebrated and thought of like I do now. But what about you?
Gotcha. I was young, and it wasn't even venison. It was fish. I was invited by a buddy to go ice fishing. My job included racing back and forth with a sled from tip up to tip up, bringing the fish back, and then burying them in a snowbank. That was my job. Me and my buddy, we'd run back and forth as the adults were pulling the fish out. Couldn't tell you strategy. All I know, my job was to pull that sled. But when we got done, we got to experience cleaning them out, and they were ended up going into a smoker. So smoked pike was my very first taste. I had that smoked pike, and it was really like I couldn't get enough of it. Like, it was just good stuff. He knew what he was doing with that smoker. I also understood what pin bones were at the same time. It stuck with me as a good thing. When I came to the idea of going back to hunting, it was almost an easy transition. I remembered, like, this fish was good, so this deer's got to be good.
We'll have to step back there because as far as fish goes, it's so ingrained in me. Like, it probably was ground up and put in my bottle. Like, fish was just something. I grew up on a lake, and we went out fishing for panfish, for bluegills. And I started doing that at a young age, 3, 4, 5 years old. And I have just so many memories of sitting there watching my older brother and my dad filleting the fish over the sink, and just being part of that experience. And that was something that we definitely had the full celebratory process of doing it our own. And it was a little more simplified process, and but it was awesome. Those memories are definitely at a young age cut me off.
I'm trying to cut you off. We're looking good on time. That's what I was trying to get to. Sorry. We'll have to work on hand signals.
Yeah.
So this has been raw. This has been uncut. It's probably been a little disorganized. But folks, I really appreciate you tuning in and listening to what we've got to say. This has been our introduction. This has been our purpose of why we're here. This has been our vision of where we see it's going. You got anything to add?
No, I think it's just going to be a great journey and something I'm looking forward to expanding my own brain and taking stuff that I know to bring it out to everybody and just take knowledge that I've had for granted and share it with everybody and go on this journey.
Awesome. Well, hey, folks, enjoy the rest of your night and keep your knife sharp. Just want to take a moment to say, hey, thanks again for taking the time and listening to our very first podcast. Make sure you check us out at Huntavore Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all the socials. We're looking to have a bi-weekly schedule of releasing every other Monday. That's our goal to start out with. Hope that you continue to listen. Thanks.